We are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me this week, you already know, it's the one and only Mr. Kevin Durso. How are you, bud?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's weird to be back after only a week off, but we figured there was enough news. It's kind of the heart of the offseason. We had to come back just a week later to catch everybody up. This
was preparation. That's what this was, because we looked at the week before and went, it can't be busier than the week before, but we don't want to take our chances.
Yep. And if you're from my family, you know what the 6 P's stand for. Prior planning prevents piss poor performance. And that's why we're back today. Maybe that's the title of the podcast. We talked a little bit. Talked a little bit off the air. Maybe we call the podcast the 6 P's. Because Chuck sure had some prior planning this summer.
I was going to say, it better be shorter than what you just said, because that's a long title.
That's a long title.
We don't do titles that long.
We're not, no. But we do have a lot to talk about today. It's episode number 121. I know I don't normally say the title off the top, but I don't know. Maybe I'll try it. You don't
say what number normally, but you know what? We're doing different things because...
It's the summer.
No, I was going to say because clearly Chuck Fletcher's trying to do something different, so maybe we're changing it up too.
Well, is he doing things different, or does he just keep signing people from Boston College? So let's dive into this. Let's dive right into this. The thing I'm the most proud of this entire summer in our group chat,
right into this, aren't you?
Yeah, yep. When we're talking about the signing that's currently on the screen, and if you're watching on our YouTube channel, you can see our banner. If you're listening, we are talking about the Flyers signing Keith Yandle, which was a story that broke probably about 24 hours before free agency opened, that it looked like he was going to sign a deal here, and then when free agency opened, he did indeed sign the deal.
It was Tuesday morning?
All I know is Spit and Chicklets had it first, because, spoiler alert, they might know the player. So the Philadelphia Flyers can currently consist of Kevin Hayes, Cam Atkinson, and Keith Yandle.
Okay, hold on. For what it's worth, Keith Yandle did not go to Boston College. He's a Boston guy.
That's fair.
He did not go to Boston College. He played in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League.
And he's been joined at the hip with Kevin Hayes for a very long time
true.
now.
Yes,
okay,
that part's
that's
true.
Fair. So those 3 players are currently on the Philadelphia Flyers roster.
Yes, they are.
There's another player from Boston College who we have discussed a number of times on this show, who was line mates with Kevin Hayes, teammates with Cam Atkinson. There were a number of other players on that team. We can talk about Chris Kreider at another time. And that player, who is a free agent next summer, has 1 year remaining on their current deal.
Right now, but I get your point. I know what you're trying to get at.
Is Johnny Gaudreau.
Okay, I'm not jumping that far right now. I need to adjust to all these other new guys first, so don't even go there with me. But
I believe I referred to Hayes, Atkinson, and Yandle as the Johnny Gaudreau tampering committee.
I don't know. All right, because I'd love to know. I need to know what he would sign for, because I don't know. Again, I don't know how they're supposed to do this. How are they supposed to afford this? That's all.
Come home, Johnny. Look, here's the thing. We're going to talk about RFA contracts later on in the show, but there are only 2 significant names left to sign. It's Travis Sanheim and Carter Hart. Flyers are currently sitting on about $8.5 million. Or about $8 million in cap space, I'm sorry.
It's actually closer to 9 in reality.
Okay. And that is not undoable if you think about the fact that Calgary might be taking a little bit of a retool this year. Who knows what's going on in Calgary? Add that to the fact that they can retain on a salary for half a year. I don't know. You can get Johnny Gaudreau's number down to a pretty manageable level, especially by the trade deadline.
Maybe. I don't know.
Come home, Johnny.
You're going in a direction I didn't plan to go right now.
Listen, when they signed Keith Yandle, it's the first thing I thought of.
I understand that, but here's the thing. Keith Yandle is a 1-year deal, so I'm not exactly looking at Keith Yandle beyond next season.
Fair enough.
The other 2, you got a point. Kevin Hayes, Cam Atkinson, this is minimum 4 years together.
Yep, there's some dedication to this little group.
I get that one. That one, you want to sit there and say the writing's on the wall? All right, and not only that, but okay, fine. You want to sit there and say something about that? Clearly, Kevin Hayes has played, I'm going to recruit all my friends. I mean, that's pretty obvious at this point.
It works in the NBA. Why shouldn't it work in the NHL?
I guess I don't know. I mean, here's the thing, okay? Because Yandle's a great signing, to be honest. Let's not sugarcoat that. It's a great signing because
At the number, yeah.
What's the risk? Exactly. What's
None.
the risk at that number? It's a year for $900,000.
Yep.
Are you kidding? And literally, I've been calling it all week. It's an insurance policy.
Absolutely.
This is flat out. I don't want to put a guy on the ice who has 3 games of NHL experience right away and throw him to the Wolves. So he gets to go play 25 minutes a night maybe in the minors, and then when he's ready, you call him up and somebody's going to move aside. It might be Yandle, it might be Justin Braun. It doesn't make a difference. I don't care which one moves aside. Someone's going to move aside when he's ready, and it might be middle of the year, it might be next season altogether. I don't know, but it doesn't really make a difference to me.
So we all know hockey is a bit of an old boys club, and there's a lot of tradition and a lot of, pride in the game. Is that fair?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Does Keith Yandle keep a roster spot longer than he should because of the Iron Man streak?
No, I don't think so. Because it's not much more than half the year anyway. I think that they want... one of the big issues that Cam York went through last year is... Let's put it this way. Before he could... or I don't want to say not completely before, but what did they have? 4 or 5 games at Michigan before you're off to World Juniors. Then he plays in World Juniors, you come back, and the rest of that schedule was crazy because I think they were on again, off again. This is on. Nope, now this game's canceled. Now this is this. He might have played 20-some-odd games at most before his season was over, and you're off to the minors, and then in the minors, they didn't know what to do with him because the team was so bad that it was literally... if he started to impress within 5 games at the minors, it was come on up and you got a chance, Right. And they literally, because of the fact that nothing mattered for the final 3 games, said you can play at the NHL level for the final 3 games because why the hell not?
Right.
Because we don't have anything to lose at this point. So I don't think that he's complete. Like I don't want to say it's that he's not completely ready. He could be training and look like he's ready, and maybe he comes in and does push for a spot in camp.
Right. If he has a really good preseason, I could see him. Right. Being a very, very late cut. Let's put it that way.
Right. That's not my worry, though, because you can already see what they want to do. And what they want to do is they don't want to have a 22-year-old or 23-year-old have to have more on his plate than he can handle or than they think he can handle because he's that young. I mean, literally, it's not the same situation, but it's Phil Myers all over again because they gave Phil Myers that shot, and look where Phil Myers is today. Phil Myers is in Nashville.
Yeah, but I'm actually more worried about the opposite of that. I'm worried about him kind of being penned in there too long and Yandle staying on that third line even when he might not necessarily be producing just because of the streak. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want him to be in the lineup if he's bad just because the hockey men say, right. He's got this streak going and you can't scratch the guy.
And I get that. I think, you know what? That's not Chuck Fletcher's problem. Right now, see, everything we talk about right now is what did Chuck Fletcher do to do anything to improve the team, make the team better, change up everything from last year.
Well, that's going to be Alain Vigneault's problem.
Right. Literally what has happened is, and I remember saying this earlier in the week on 97.3 when I went on, I guess it was either Monday or Tuesday to talk about some stuff. It was... You've made your bet. Look, there's been a lot of betting going on. Let's be clear. There's bets on players. There's bets on players who are already here turning it around from last year.
I'm not going to make it a Vander Kane joke. I'm not going to make it a Vander Kane joke. I'm not going to make it a Vander Kane joke.
We're not talking about him anyway. He's not a Flyer.
I know, but there's been a lot of bets made. You're not wrong.
I know, but I love when I get asked questions about players that are not in Philadelphia, as if I really know.
Intimately cover every team.
Right. Well, right. Look, I understand what his reputation is. Don't get me wrong, but that's a story for another time. We're not here to talk about Evander Kane.
We're certainly not.
Anyway, no, they're making bets. We get that, but maybe outside of the other biggest bet that there is out there, which we're going to get into in probably about 5 more minutes when we switch to the next signing that happened.
Yep.
The biggest bet is actually on your coaching staff because you're basically backing the whole coaching staff. You're sitting here saying it's basically like you're almost saying it wasn't you. Now that's not entirely true, and I think that they can agree. The coaching staff shoulders part of the blame for what happened last season, no matter how you want to spin it. Right. I get it. They didn't have practice time. They didn't have this. They didn't have that. Doesn't matter to me. It does not matter at all. You did not perform to expectations. It's a complete organization-wide issue.
Right.
That's clear. But you're 2 years in with this coaching staff. You had one really good year where you looked like you could go pretty far, and you almost did. I mean, you were one win away from being one of the final 4 teams left. Let's be real.
Yep.
And then you had this past year, which was the total opposite. Expectations were great coming in. Maybe they were too high because of the fact that you didn't.
Clearly, they were too high given the result.
Well, it's the result made it too high, but maybe it was too high because of the fact that we all sat there and said, Phil Myers is taking a big step. Look at what Travis Konechny's done. Look at what
Carter Hart's done.
Well, yeah, but look at what some of these other guys too. Like we were talking about anybody. I mean, Joel Farabee was the only one who we looked at who was a younger guy who actually took the step.
We talked about it all season long. Joel Farabee was the only young player that looked good. JVR was the only older player that looked good. The rest of the team pretty much suffered.
I would argue that at times Claude Giroux and Sean Couturier gave you what you would expect.
Fair.
The problem is that at Claude Giroux's age, you can't sit there and say every night, be that guy.
You can't expect that out of him.
Right. You can't do that to him anymore. Now here's the thing. You want to watch, and it's too early to tell. That's part of the problem. We can sit here and do this, and we probably will. I mean, as we're sitting here doing this, it's officially August. It is August 1st as we sit here doing this. Yep. And that means that we realistically have probably about 6 weeks until training camp starts, roughly. Preseason starts at the end of September. We know this. So before they play a game, we're going to have
2 weeks of camp.
Well, 2 weeks of camp, so we're going to have 6 weeks until training camp, probably.
Roughly, yeah.
Right. So
which is kind of exciting. I'm not going to lie.
Oh, sure. It should be it should be for one big reason. Because in addition to the entire show that we had last week, where we talked about, hey, they did this and they did this and they did this and they did this and this guy's not here anymore and this guy's not here and this is a new face. Like how many new and exciting it's the Christmas morning feeling, right? You go down, it's a bunch of new toys that go with the ones you already have, right?
Well, and then there's Nate Thompson, but we'll talk about him.
Nate Thompson's a different story, though. I agree with some stuff that was said about Nate Thompson to an extent.
I know.
That one comes down to something different, but we'll get to that too. But here's Nate Thompson ties into this conversation because, again, it's the coaching staff. It's your utilization of what you do with the practice time, what you do with the players you have, finding the right fits. That's half of the mix problem, right? The mix isn't just, hey, I don't have I have a bunch of players that don't seem like they want to play for each other and play as a unit. It's the coaching staff is sitting here why was you can take your pick on a couple of different guys, but why was this guy up or why was that guy up? You know what I mean? Because at the end of the year, Alain Vigneault sat there and went, I'm just trying to put anything out there that I think is going to work. He was literally almost throwing stuff at the wall going, is this going to work? Is this going to change something? It's like when they bring in a bunch of kids, like when Jackson Cates is playing games because you're going, let's call him up because maybe he changes something. Maybe, maybe Igor Zamula changes something. Let's put Cam York in because it's the end of the year. Here comes Wade Allison. Here's Tanner Lazinski. All these new guys trying to come in because you're trying anything. You can't, you literally can't think of anything that makes it better. So you're going, let me try this. And look at who you're scratching in the process. I'm going to give, okay, Oscar Lindblom's coming back from his treatments. He might need a day. I'm giving Nolan Patrick a day. I'm pulling Aube Kubel at this point in time. Maybe I'm pulling this guy. It was all over the map. I mean, he benched Travis Konechny at one point in time, I believe. He's pulling from the defensive side. He's pulling. It's Shane Gostisbehere off this night. Nope. Now it's Robert Haig. Nope. Now it's Phil Myers. There wasn't many consistencies when it came to that lineup because it was just, let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try this thing. Yep. It was just that's half of your battle.
Yeah, and we kind of see that every year. And one thing that they did do, that Chuck Fletcher did go out and do, is he attempted to shore up some holes and get some depth. And we saw some of that. That
to me this is part of where I think I was going with some of that too. Is part of what was most impressive to me. You can look at and analyze every single player that's been acquired. And we certainly did last week when it was, let's talk about Ryan Ellis, let's talk about Rasmus Ristolainen, let's talk about Cam Atkinson. You can do that over and over and over again and decide whether or not you're on the analytics side or the hockey guy side or a combination of both or whatever in evaluating their ability. The bottom line is you're not going to know until September, October when we start to see gameplay.
Yep.
That's the test. There's nothing around it. We can sit here and play on paper all we want to, and there's arguments to both sides because I've seen people who do the on paper stuff very intently who go, this guy's not that good of a player. I don't know what they're thinking. And then go, well, the wins above replacement level says there'll be this amount of points, because I'm sure you saw that one at some point.
Yeah.
Like, there'll be this amount of points, and it's this high in the division. There's people like, and then there's general hockey guys who sit there and go, they've improved enough that they should be this level.
Well, and that's all well and good, but most of those guys 12 months ago were saying, or I'm sorry, in January, weird season, we're saying that they're going to be a top 5 team in the league and they're going to be, you know, in the Final Four, and
Sure.
that's not the team we saw. So the models are great.
Well, because
projections are great.
Because
they got to get out there and play.
Well, and exactly, because the reality is that they were what they were the season before because they got hot. You play when you start playing well, and the structure's there, and the chemistry is good, and the room is fun, and everybody's having a good time. It snowballs the other way.
Right.
You get this big snowball effect that turns into, look how many games in a row you're winning because of the fact that you have fun doing it. And you
Yep.
and because here's the thing, let's not act like that team 2 years ago was that good prior to January.
No, they got hot.
Right, it wasn't that good. Yep. They had an okay October that couldn't be qualified as slow start, but couldn't be qualified as super hot either.
And they were pretty medium, 500.
Now, they had an outstanding November. Let's not sugarcoat that.
Right.
They ended November with the most wins they'd had in a month in franchise history or something like that.
Man, I'll be honest. I don't remember anything before the pandemic. This year isn't a blur. That season is a blur for me.
That's what you have me for, because
you're an encyclopedia. You're not wrong.
Well, and I was at a lot. I think actually at a lot. I was at all of those home games.
I was at one of those home games with you, and I barely remember it.
Yeah, well, you know what? Because that game, in all seriousness, was probably as forgettable as it comes, because it was against the Detroit Red Wings.
It was the Black Friday game, and instead of doing 2:00 against the Rangers like they always do, they're like, "Oh, we're gonna do 5 p.m. against the Detroit Red Wings."
This season could be fun, by the way, for that, because this year it's Carolina. We didn't really talk about this last week.
Carolina's gone full heel this offseason.
Yeah, they really have changed a lot. Like, you know what? And that's one of the things. Okay, and this is why I'm saying you got to let this play out on paper. You've got to or not on paper. You got to let this play out, because we can do the on paper thing forever. But I'm looking around at some of the things that these teams are doing, and I go, I don't know if you've gotten better per se.
I don't think Carolina's gotten better.
Carolina's probably gotten worse, because you lose Dougie Hamilton.
You don't have any goalies. You don't have goalies.
You do, but you're real. Again, it's kind of a leap of faith thing. I mean, how many goalies have changed? Look. I thought I saw, if I'm not mistaken, I could be
you're
wrong.
trusting Freddie Anderson?
Or who was the other one they signed? Antti Ranta?
I mean, Antti Ranta's solid, but he's always been a tandem guy.
He's been a tandem guy, and okay, and listen, this was one of my things, because at the end of the day, I think all right, well, we can always come backwards.
Yeah,
let's just go to this one for a minute, because
we're talking goalies. We might as well.
Yeah, well, let me get into this for a minute, because here's one of my things. This is one of the few things you can say about Martin Jones, okay? Because every goalie out there, I turned around and I said, listen, this guy's going to be, like, potentially, you got a guy out there, this is an upgrade to Brian Elliott. No, I'm not talking about Martin Jones, listen.
Okay.
So all these other guys, you're going, Jonathan Bernier, Darcy Kemper, if you trade for him. Who else were we thinking of? Like, there was a couple other names out there.
If I had known Alex Nedeljkovic was available, I would have pushed for that, but it's hard to get that trade in the division. I understand.
Not only that, but I think that the other issue with the trades was something along the lines of, I'm trying to think of where it would have been. Like, I think the Flyers are so active on the trade market with other things that
you just can't answer all the phones.
I mean, let's put it this way: that trade went down, and then I think the other one, like one of theirs, happened right after. It was the same day.
They made 4 trades in a week. It could have been any of them.
But I remember reading that one, and then one of the Flyers ones went down. It might have been the Gostisbehere one, the same day.
Okay.
Like, because I actually think, because I remember Broads texting me something, and I went to go look, because he just texted me the eyeball emoji, right? Like, oh, something's going on. And so at first I don't even know what he's talking about. So I go over, and actually the first thing I saw on Twitter was Nedeljkovic to Detroit, and I go, oh, goalie trade. That's interesting.
That's weird. You don't see them very often.
Yeah,
right.
You don't see that very often.
Not when they're 24 and just breaking out, or however old Nedeljkovic is.
Right. So I go, all right, that one's interesting. And then I saw Gostisbehere's name come up, and I went, oh, you're talking about Ghost. Right. Okay. I get it, but I did see that. So it's something like, it's how much work would you like Chuck Fletcher to do at the same time?
That's fair. Right? And also, like, again, if you're Carolina,
he's working the phones with Arizona. He's not going to be working the phones with Carolina at the same time.
And if you're Carolina, you're not necessarily incentivized to trade your 24-year-old starting goaltender within your division.
Especially when they already have a goaltender who's
already very good.
Right, the year before was outstanding.
But if Nedeljkovic is willing to sign a 3x3.5 bridge like he signed in Detroit, man, I would have loved to have that on my roster.
So let me go into something about this particular signing for the Flyers that I think this is my theory.
This being Martin Jones, right?
Yes. Okay. This is my theory because I know that there's people out there that go, oh, they had so many better options. Why Martin Jones?
Yeah, this makes me nervous.
Okay, now and listen, I've had 2 reactions like this the entire offseason where I sit there and I go, oh, Chuck, what are you doing? And it's not because I necessarily don't buy what they're trying to do with the player.
Was the first one Ristolainen?
Yes, because and I'll tell you why. Because it's nothing to do with could the player bounce back? Could this happen? Could that happen? What the combination from analytics to hockey on ice stuff is, or eye test, whatever. It's the thing that I know is coming when I see these names. I get that way not because of the fact that I don't like it or I don't think it could work. I get like that because I know what's coming on Twitter. Like I already know the reaction that's coming.
Because you know you have to watch the firestorm.
Right. Because I know that now and here's the other thing. Because this is the end of July. It's a long time before you get to mid-September and early October when the games start happening for people to try to dissect this 20,000 different ways about how this will work. No, it won't. This guy sucks. No, he doesn't. Like it's that back and forth conversation that people have. There's people who like this move. There's people who don't like it. And people are going to play the on-paper game for 2 months now to figure out whether they're better or not. Well, and I kind of can't stand that after a while.
The rough part here is that the paper game does not treat Martin Jones very well.
In the last 3 years, no, it doesn't. And I listen, I didn't sugarcoat that. I went on the air the day that they signed him and literally said his numbers in the last 3 years have been horrific.
Awful.
I did not lie about that at all. I understand what they're trying to do. Kim Dillabaugh was his goalie coach in L.A. Things worked out in L.A. because that's how he became the starter in San Jose. You don't just move on from L.A. as the backup, Jonathan Quick, and get a starter job and then make the Cup final, 3 years into your starting job?
No, he was really, really good for several years there, Martin Jones.
And little caveat on the last 3 years for him, because the last 2 years have been bad, and the team's been bad in San Jose, let's be clear.
Well, in the last 2 years, he's had Erik Karlsson and Brett Burns playing as a major defensive pair in front of him. It's not going to do you wonders defensively.
Of which, by the way, that was a point of conversation this week when we looked at some of the contracts that are out there among individual defensemen and realized that the Flyers' top pairing makes near as much as some of these guys. I mean, Erik Karlsson's making $11.5 million, and the Flyers' top pairing next year makes $13 million.
And isn't Karlsson's contract just like the first year? Doesn't he have 6 years left on that deal?
Karlsson's deal and Drew Doughty's deal, which are both $11 million or more, are only in year 3 of 8.
It's amazing.
They have 5 or 6 years left on those contracts, and they're awful contracts.
It's amazing seeing what teams banked on the cap going up a little bit every year.
Or that really thought... I mean, here's the thing. If you asked me... I'm dead serious when I looked this up. If you asked me, how old is Erik Karlsson? How old is Drew Doughty? I would have told you 35. They're 31. Right.
Yep.
It feels like they've been around forever.
Well, because, I mean, Erik Karlsson has been horrifically injured a couple different times. A lot of people know about that. And Drew Doughty just played so many playoff games that he's got at least 2 extra seasons under his belt. They made the playoffs and made deep runs every year.
In part, but I think we also forget...
miles.
In part, but I think we also forget how young Doughty was when they won the Cup.
That's true.
Doughty was only in the league for, 3 years when he's already playing significant minutes and winning Stanley Cups with LA.
Something like that, yeah.
I mean, it was early in history. I mean, let's this way. I think you and I have agreed on this before that the best defenseman in the league by a lot of standards is Victor Hedman. But Victor Hedman was drafted in 2009 before winning the Cup in 2020. Sometimes the journey takes a little bit before you are the best in the league. And Drew Doughty was literally being told this at year 4.
Speaking of best defensemen in the league, we're talking about the fact that those guys are making 11 and 11 million and 11 and a half million. How about the fact that Cale Makar is making 9.5 for the next 6 years, or 9 for the next 6 years, and Seth Jones is making 9.5, and Zach Werenski is making a hair over 9.5 because screw you, Seth Jones, I'm making more than you. You know that's 100% what that was. Come on.
Well, in fairness, by the way, it makes sense now. It explains why they can't have both.
Well, sure, but
hilarious.
It is hilarious to me that he signed for just a hair over what Seth signed for, just a little bit more than what Seth Jones makes.
Because can you imagine the salary cap, basically, especially if it doesn't move going into next year, also, because that's a possibility that Chuck Fletcher has told us many times. They don't anticipate this thing moving for a little while.
2 more years, yeah.
Right. So, I'm using it as 2 more seasons. So I'm saying this season and next, and then maybe after next season when you
get some wiggle.
Summer of 2023, which, by the way, is why for anybody who sits, I saw people jumping all over him going, oh my God, he's killed the future of this team because he's trading draft picks. Do you really care about a 2023 second round pick that hits maybe 15% of the time, 20% of the time?
No.
I don't. I'm not sitting here playing the draft pick game. You did that already for 7 years.
Right. When you're making trades, like trading for 31-year-old Ryan Ellis, you don't care about that draft pick. You're acquiring a top pair defenseman to make deep playoff runs now.
I love how you mentioned it with Ryan Ellis, who wasn't acquired for any picks or prospects. But I know your point.
But I'm talking about when you're making those moves in the same offseason, you're sending a very clear message.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you look, we're minus Phil Myers, we're minus Nolan Patrick.
Oh, we'll do this.
Right, we've done the plus and the minuses, and you end up with maybe better players, maybe not better players. We'll talk about that later on. But overall, you do end up with older players, kind of generally. And you're sending the message that the time to rebuild, the time to retool is past, and it's time to start putting wins on the board in the playoffs.
Well, because you don't have a choice anymore.
Yep, it's time to go.
So, all right, so Martin Jones. Okay, so caveat on Martin Jones' last 3 seasons, by the way. Okay, the last 2, he's had a terrible team in front of him. He hasn't been good. San Jose's been really bad, right?
Fair enough.
We know this. 3 years ago, though, he had an average regular season. The numbers lined up exactly with where he is now. The save percentage, in fact, has been the exact same for 3 years in a row, so talk about consistency.
And what is that, by the way?
896.
Yeah, sub 900. Consistently garbage.
I get that. Do you know what his numbers were following that season, though? I do have to go back and look it up. But
he was spectacular.
Well, because I didn't realize this, because I think we sit there and look at Martin Jones' performances or the overall numbers for the last 3 years and go, well, this just means they sucked all those years, right? And if you thought about the last 2 years specifically, you go, yeah, San Jose probably sucked all those years, right? Turns out San Jose in the I guess
18-19.
Yes, I believe so. Let me go back to that one really quick because I'm trying to get it figure out where all this is. Why did it do that? Hockey reference. You're not treating me well.
Always blaming the technology.
No, it really is this for whatever reason. But all right, let's go to this for a minute. Because you know what? It's because I'm not looking at the team. I'm looking at the player.
I understand.
Okay, this is how I get to it. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, okay. So the 2018-19 San Jose Sharks are the team that made that crazy comeback, or almost blew it, I should say. Or they almost blew it. Made a crazy comeback against the Vegas Golden Knights in Game 7 of that first round series.
Right. That was the 5-minute major. Right.
Yes.
That was that team.
And then they went in overtime. By the way, the winner in overtime that year was future back-to-back Stanley Cup champion Barclay Goodrow.
Okay. Does Barclay Goodrow have 2, or did they acquire him after the first?
They acquired him last trade deadline.
You're right. Okay, from the Sharks. Right.
Well, because talk about change in Tampa too, and I'm not trying to get off point with the Flyer stuff, but change in Tampa being here's Barclay Goodrow and here's Blake Coleman acquired down the stretch. Actually, down the stretch 2 seasons ago to go for it. They win. They win again with the 1 year remaining on the contract, and it's thank you for your services. We don't have the money to sign you, so they're both off.
Yep.
And playing on a line with Yanni Gourde, who also got picked up by Seattle, so that whole line is gone.
The whole line just moved. Yep.
Quite possibly, arguably, their best line in the final couple of games played in that series, to all in different places because Barclay Goodrow's with the Rangers, Blake Coleman's going to Calgary, and Yanni Gourde's in Seattle now.
And you know the most frustrating part?
What's that?
Tampa's still going to be great.
Well, sure, because they made a bunch of like
You can literally just
low-risk,
clip
high-reward
out.
signings.
You can just clip out their most clutch line in the coming down the stretch, and it just doesn't matter because they still have Steven Stamkos, Braden
right.
Point, Nikita
Right.
Kucherov, Victor Hedman, Andrei Vasilevsky.
Because
Like,
you tell me that signing a guy like Corey Perry, if you can't beat him, join him,
yeah,
on that cap hit isn't going to work out for them. That
It
isn't
is.
going to work out.
And-
Because do you want to know? And here's the funny thing: you wanted to talk about tampering. I don't think it's really tampering. I'm just making a joke here. But quest for the cup. John Cooper talked to Corey Perry for a long time, didn't he?
I didn't actually say it, but that's funny.
You're an absolute warrior. And then the part that the microphones didn't get. Come play for us.
Right? Come here.
Join
Come to
the dark-
Tampa.
Join the dark side.
No state tax.
Right. Well, he didn't. I don't think he had state tax anyway because he was playing in Canada. So
Okay, but Canadian taxes are far higher than.
I have heard that
Yeah.
players are a little bit more opposed to playing in Canada because of stuff like that.
I have heard that players with 8-team no trade lists tend to list the 7 Canadian teams and Buffalo
Really? Oh well, yeah, as the non-trade.
because taxes and no, I'm not going to Buffalo. So I'm not sure how true that is. I have not seen no trade clauses with my own eyes. But I tell you, I've heard that a lot of times if a player has an 8-team no trade list, it's very specifically 8 teams so that it's no Canada, no Buffalo.
But that team that year, and so back to San Jose. So that team that year beats Vegas in the first round. They win. They move on. They
Right.
then beat Colorado in
Yep.
7. And then they get to the conference final against St. Louis. And by the way, go up 2-1 in the series
Yep.
before losing the last 3. And then they that was where they bowed out.
You're
But
right.
but to get an idea from Martin Jones' standpoint, you go down to Martin Jones' numbers in the regular season, strictly regular season. Now, first of all, this is going to be one key difference for him moving forward because
He's not going to be
started.
starting 50 games a year.
Try 62.
Yeah, that's about right. He played a lot of games in San Jose for a very long time.
And here's the thing. Record-wise, San Jose was a good team.
Yeah.
Because Martin Jones' record that year was 36-19-5.
Yeah, they were great.
They were a good team. Now, the save
but
percentage...
it wasn't because of him is the problem.
Now, the save percentage was .896, as we said. The goals against was .294, which is a little bit better than what we saw from the last season. Like,
Honestly, when you have an 896, you're pretty happy with a 294 goals against.
Right. This is also probably right before the bubble burst with the Erik Karlsson's here, Brent Burns
Yep.
is here,
It was still the good Sharks. It was still
and by the way,
Marleau, Couture, the original.
Well, and by the way, look at your center group. Couture's part of it. Hurdle's
Thornton.
part of it. Thornton, Pavelski.
Yep.
You've got some talent there that's nearing the end of the line, but at the same time,
That was that group's last run.
right, pretty much, exactly. So in the playoffs, Martin Jones still didn't have the best save percentage or goals against, to be honest. He had an .898 and .302, but yet 10-9 record. Like they played really well in front of him. Which there you go. If you can get the scoring, if you can kind of limit the goals as best you can, because here's the thing about an average, it's 3 goals on average roughly, but no matter which way you spin it, 294 or 302 or whatever,
Right.
it doesn't make a difference. It's about 3 goals.
It rounds off to 3. Right.
But if that means that you're offsetting nights of 4 and 5 with 1 and 2s, like there were nights I go and look in the playoffs specifically. If I pull up each series based on what they did. So I go to the first round against Vegas. The final scores, so they win game 1 5-2. So he gives up 2 goals in game 1. That'll win you games. But the next night they lose 5-3. So that won't win you games. They lost to Vegas 6-3 in game 3. That does not win. And I think he got pulled in that one. They lost to Vegas 5-0. That doesn't win you games. Then when they were trying to make that comeback, 5-2, 2-1, 5-4 in overtime.
I'm gonna hit you with a harsh truth here.
Sure.
If Martin Jones starts more than 30 games, the Flyers are in trouble.
I think 30's the number. I think 30's the number.
I think if Carter Hart is good enough to be the starter, the Flyers are in good shape.
Well, that's the bet. That's the bet I was alluding to.
I think if you are relying on Martin Jones in any way, shape, or form beyond play the second half of back-to-backs and be a backup goalie, I think you're in trouble. I don't see a bounce back out of this guy. Maybe I'm wrong. The guy's got talent, but man, he has fallen off, and it's not pretty. And I don't know if there's a way back.
I can understand that.
But again, 1 year, $2 million, not a huge investment, not a huge risk. I'm okay with the move. But man, you're really counting on Carter Hart bounce back.
Sure, that's the bigger gamble. That's what I'm saying. Like, outside of the gamble being the coaching staff's going to make this mix work because you've changed the mix clearly, the biggest bet of the offseason is Carter Hart's going to be back to form.
That's going to be the story of the season.
And here's the thing. Do I think that's calculated? Yes, I do. Because I think that, yes, your 22-year-old, 23-year-old goalie who was outstanding in the first couple of years of his career, who had a bad year with in a year though where defensively your structure was gone. You just lost it and never got it back.
Yep. And
for one, and two, how do you regroup when you don't practice, when you don't get to go out and do anything to get your mind?
There's no team chemistry. Right.
The whole thing was shot. So I think that's what you're banking on. You're banking on everything is supposed to be different. You're supposed to play an 82-game schedule, which means, like, here's a great example. Go look at the schedule to start their season, for example. They start on a Friday night, right? And they play whenever that first game is. They're going to play 4 games all at home. Nothing's a back-to-back. They have 2 days off between one of those sets of games. And then after they play Florida, before they go on the road in Western Canada, they get 3 days off. Who gets 3 days off at any point in the season? You know what I mean?
Like, especially when you're going to Western Canada.
Or I'm sorry, I shouldn't say it like that. I should say, when last year did they get 3 days off in a row?
Never.
Well, I can tell you one time they did.
They took 2 weeks off.
When they had 2 weeks off because they couldn't play, and you're literally telling 7 or 8 guys, recover from this thing. You know, like that.
I think we're going to see this year how much COVID really affected the team from that perspective, from the team dinner's perspective.
We are, but we're not, because of the fact that basically Chuck Fletcher told you right now with all of this, that wasn't an excuse. That's no fair. Excuse. Because if it was an excuse, then Phil Myers is still here. And some other people may still be here. I'm
willing to bet that. So last year, coming down the stretch on the 31 Thoughts podcast, Elliot Friedman mentioned that among several non-playoff teams, the grind was really getting to him. Not seeing teammates and not blah, blah, blah. And he said on that podcast, I can find the timestamp if we want, that he wouldn't be, or he was pretty sure there are some rooms that hated each other.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if the Flyers fell into that category, and that's why we saw major pieces moved this offseason.
And who was this that you said this?
Elliot Friedman on the 31 Thoughts podcast.
Because I was listening, then I was making sure we were on the same page with it. Because I heard something else that basically he flat out kind of said there were guys who just did not like the coaching.
He said hated each other, hated the coaches, hated being here.
But the clip that I heard specifically that really cited it was, there are guys that did not like this coaching staff and could not get on the same page with them. And basically the idea was, then if you're not on the same page, then we're going to find people who are.
Yep. Shape up or ship out.
And I can't help but think, quite honestly, that this goes back to things like Jake Voracek saying, oh, nobody plays 60. We say it, but nobody really does it. Like, what kind of attitude is that to have when you're struggling as badly as you are? That's not the way that this works. So
when I think
that long time coming, to be honest.
When we know that there was a bad stench coming out of the locker room, and then one of your alternate captains gets traded, it's hard not to speculate.
Sure.
Especially when we see a culture shift a culture problem like we saw last year, and the demands for a change like we have seen from Chuck Fletcher. It's hard not to speculate. And and it doesn't really do us any good, and we obviously wish Jake the best in Columbus, but it makes you wonder.
Right. I mean, because you know what it is? I also think we heard before the trade that that conversation was had, right? That management sits down and basically says, listen, Jake, if we have to do this because it makes the team better, we're going to try to do it. And there was an agreement. There was an agreement on that if that happens, it happens. If it's time, it's time.
If there's a move to be made, it will be made. Right.
And the bottom line is that by having that conversation and agreeing to it, like, they're telling you right there what the goal is.
You blew the locks off the door. He's gone. If you bring him back now, it's awkward and poor.
But basically, the bottom line, like the thing that I heard last week, like over the course of the last week, is that basically look at who's gone and then connect the dots here. These are guys that all had some kind of question about, is their head in the right place when it comes to what they have to do? Let's just say Phil Myers may have a lot of potential, but all of last season he didn't learn from any mistakes. Period. I mean, he was
copy paste that for Nolan Patrick.
Nolan Patrick, I think the issue with him was okay, and I'm not talking about this from a health standpoint. I think it was a head issue in terms of
a mental issue.
When you're told for your entire life, going into you're 18 years old, you're going into the draft, and you're told your entire life you're the best, you're the best, you're the best, and then you're not the best when you get to the next level. And you've got to work for it. There's people who embrace that and go, then I'm going to become the best because I have to work harder at it to get there.
I have to earn that.
And right. There's guys who think it's going to come to them that easily. And I think that last couple of years, or that last year in juniors, when for a year, from whatever year when he was 17 years old, I guess, for a year, everybody's telling you, you're going first overall, buddy. Just get ready for it. You're going to be the first name called at the draft. And then the pressure creeps up on you because it wasn't just Nico Hischier. I mean, it was by the end of it, but there were other names. Like Makar was becoming louder, and Heiskanen was becoming louder. Like these guys were not.
And you were even starting to hear things about Pettersson and guys a little further down.
Far off in the distance. These guys were coming, and the pressure starts to mount on you. And he felt it too. It was and look, there's conflict here whether that was actually the pick of consensus or if they're like everybody thinks it is, but if in that room but if in that draft room that there wasn't an idea that there was other guys that they liked better, that Ron Hextall said nope, this is the guy. And look, you can sit there and say whatever you want to about it, all the connections that Ron Hextall has to that team, the Brandon connection, the fact that was his junior team, the fact that the kid's from Manitoba, like great, maybe that's why you do it. And look, on the surface, nobody was going to complain because it was, look at what this kid's numbers were 2 years ago. He had some health issues, still killed it in juniors.
Nobody questioned the pick when it was picked.
And that's not to say that Nolan Patrick can't be a good player in the league and start putting up numbers on a hot streak.
I still think he's going to be, for the record.
Right. Let's just say.
I would not be surprised if he's a point per game player in his career.
Maybe, but here's my counter to that then. When am I supposed to wait for that until he's 30?
I'm not saying the Flyers should have waited for it. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised. I think Nolan Patrick is primed for a fresh start. You hear that phrase all the time in hockey.
Sure.
And I think that's exactly what the Cody Glass swap with Nashville and Vegas was.
I also think, in fairness, and I'm not going to try to sit there, I'm not trying to sit there and say that there's other places that aren't critical of their players. But when Miro Heiskanen falls into Dallas and Cale Makar falls into Colorado, and by the way, Colorado with Nathan McKinnon, Gabe Landeskog, Mikko Rantanen, good core and things like that.
A really good defensive core already.
Really good young core, by the way, like in Colorado, because they're basically hitting the prime right now. I mean, you're going for it right now. So.
Well, you also have to remember how they did it, because the Avalanche built that core through being bad. The Flyers got that second pick through spiking a lottery.
Well, right, I get that. But what I'm saying is that there's almost an element of, you have to wonder, is it also the environment? As in, the fans hold the teams to such a high standard that if you are not tough enough to handle the criticism, especially when you've been told your entire life you're the best and now you're not the best and you're kind of hearing the question marks, is that the chance for Nolan Patrick to revitalize his career because you're going to a place in Vegas where it's probably a lot more, you'll get it eventually, it's okay. You know what I mean? It's probably a lot more of that than it is than in Philly.
As far as I'm concerned, Nolan Patrick has two options. He can turn into Nail Yakupov and be in the KHL within the next 3 years, or he can turn into Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and be a solid 2C and revitalize his career.
I get that. What I'm trying to get at is that here, with the way that the fans are, you've got to be really headstrong. And the problem is that when you've been told you're the best and you're not the best anymore, and you're struggling to get anything and again, maybe there's also something we don't know about his health on top of it. But if there's something we don't know about his health, then he won't last in the league, period. And then we'll know the answers later.
Did Nolan Patrick represent Canada on the world stage? He played for their juniors team at some point, right?
No, because I think that the year that
Was
he
he hurt?
really would have gone, he was hurt. So
Okay. I was going to say, because I'd be willing to bet that those Canadian fans for World Juniors are more numerous and more passionate than a lot of your average Philadelphia Flyers fans.
And let's be real. Okay,
I think it's a bigger market.
No, I agree, that I agree with. I'm saying I don't recall him playing on that stage to get that kind of spotlight, I suppose. Okay. And then when you're playing in the WHL and you were already this great at 16, and then 17 you're even better, and then at 18, like literally, there's people who are going, it doesn't matter. You could have sat out the whole year, and someone's going to take you top 5 because you were that good. Right.
And he did only play 33 games his draft year.
But had what, 50 something points, 40 something points, 52. Like 48, like 48,
46,
right? Yeah. So like,
pretty
come
good.
On, exactly. Like you are a great junior player. You're an outstanding junior player. Like I get it. So that's why some of these things work. We're still talking about Martin Jones on
somehow.
No, I know. The idea is that we're talking about the bounce back stuff, right? Like it's about bouncing back, and taking a leap of faith on some people. And that's the thing, and it's, you're right about that element of it. Because while you were talking about, we shifted to Nolan Patrick somehow, but you basically said if he's got to play more than 30 games, you're in trouble. My counter is not necessarily on a number, because I don't hesitate to sit there and say no, because in terms of, I don't hesitate to sit there and say, if I somehow get to a point in the year where I have to use Martin Jones 5 or 6 games in a row because there's something going on.
If I have to use Martin Jones because Carter Hart isn't good enough to take most of the starts.
Well, yes, then that's a big problem. I'm saying if I have to use Martin Jones for 5 or 6 starts in a row because Carter Hart tweaks something, it's going to be a week. You need to play Martin Jones.
And you don't even have Alex Lyon to fall back on anymore because he signed in Carolina. He's going to go be their third goalie.
That might have been the least surprising news, to be honest. Like
Alex Lyon leaving? Yeah, absolutely.
Well, because if he thinks he's got a shot somewhere, and listen, you know what?
Go for it, kid.
And you know what? He does have a shot. You know why? Because the goalies in Carolina now are Frederick Anderson and Antti Ranta, and both of them have had injury trouble in the past.
Yes, sir.
If you get a shot because of that, look, is there irony that he's probably now, because it's a 2-way deal, he's going to go play for the team that he beat in the longest AHL
in the 5
game
overtime
in history?
Game. Yeah.
Yes, there's irony to that. But I don't think I wouldn't be shocked if he finds a way to make it into a game at some point, into the lineup, starting a game for the Carolina Hurricanes this year because somebody gets hurt.
I won't be surprised in the slightest. And you know what? He'll probably look pretty good too.
So here's where we were going with the Martin Jones thing.
Right.
Because I don't have a problem starting Martin Jones 5 games in a row if Carter Hart's not physically well. He can handle the workload. You used Brian Elliott last year for 26 starts. It was a 56-game season. That's basically half of the season.
It's too many.
Right. So 26 starts. And oh, by the way, he got into 30 games. You know what else that means? It means Carter Hart got pulled 4 times in 20
in a 56-game season. Right.
He only started 25 games.
Right.
So he got pulled 4 times. So
almost a sixth of the time.
Right. So getting pulled nearly 20% of the time is not very good, is it? I don't know if we can possibly see worse from Carter Hart when
don't say that.
No, when you consider what you've tried to address here.
Well, we just jinxed that. Carter Hart's going to have an 865 this season.
Well, look, if he does, then you've got bigger concerns whether or not Martin Jones can play.
At that point, we have a conversation about Felix Sandstrom, and we start talking about who the next goalie up in the pipeline is. Right.
Now, okay, so my Martin Jones theory, because you brought up these other guys in the system, but this is my theory. Because
is this a stopgap?
Well, I saw a lot of people who turn around and go, well, he got $2 million. Braden Holtby only got $2 million for a year, too. Why not him? Or what about James Reimer got 2 or a little over 2, and why not him? Or, there were even talks about Laurent Brossoit, who signed with Vegas to be the backup to Robin Lehner, who's been solid behind Connor Hellebuck in Winnipeg for the last 2 years.
Right.
The only knock that anybody had on him, and I wrote it because I wrote his name, ironically enough, by the way, I think I wrote every goalie that they probably could have looked at outside of Martin Jones in my preview for free.
Is it that Carter Hart starts or is it that Connor Hellebuck starts too many games and you don't see Brossoit enough?
It's that Brossoit does not have enough experience as a starter to go, is he a tandem level guy or is he just a backup to a really good goalie? You know? And someone's going to take a leap of faith on that as well, no doubt about it. But the bottom line was...
Well, the argument there, if you're Vegas, is Robin Lehner a starter? Can you have Brissett just be a backup and not have to be a tandem guy?
Well, we'll see about that too, for sure.
Right.
But so my thing is that outside of that, like, I think Jonathan Bernier was the ideal for the Flyers. If you're asking me who they sat down and said...
Was at the top of Chuck Fletcher's list.
Right. If you ask me who they sat down and really wanted, I think it was Jonathan Bernier. The problem is Jonathan Bernier got a 2-year deal with a cap hit of over $4 million.
Yeah, and that was not happening.
And that wasn't happening because for one big reason. Actually, for two big reasons. Because as long as Carter Hart and Travis Sanheim don't have contracts, you are not signing somebody to anything north of $3 million right now.
Nope.
So that is why.
And until you have Giroux and Couturier locked up, next summer is questionable too.
Yeah, yes and no, because I say yes and no because there are options. Like, there's options where the money will show up. Because
the Flyers cap-friendly page looks pretty interesting when you start looking at who's leaving after this next year.
Yeah,
but that's for a show in the future.
Because I wrote it down somewhere. I think I either wrote it down or I definitely said it on the air earlier this week. They only have 10 guys who are under contract beyond this season.
Yep. And there's a lot on the line.
Oh, and that includes assuming Carter Hart and Travis Sanheim get multi-year deals, which I think they will.
And you know what? If you're Flyers management, like ownership, you might look at that and go, well, if things don't work out this year, it's a pretty good time to clean house.
Well, that's the bet, right? The bet is this is either going to turn it around or it's going to show even more flaws with the roster than it did before, and you're going to have even more changes next year.
This could be a very, very big year for the Philadelphia Flyers.
It already is. I mean, because now what you have to do is basically this defines whether or not you really were turning the corner with that really good year under AV and making a playoff push and getting within one game of the conference final, or whether you are the mediocre team that we saw for the 8 years before that and the team last year. Like, what are you? Are you the team that because right now on paper, like, this goes back to the expectations a little bit, right? If you ask me, what do I think of what they've done? And, like, really quick, I'm trying to tile. Okay, so I'll get into what we think of the team moving forward in a second. So the Martin Jones theory is that they did not want to sign a guy. If you've noticed, every guy that is considered more of a risk when it comes to adding him, or a bet, as we're calling them, the bets are all 1-year deals.
Right.
You are bringing back, like, you signed Martin Jones, 1-year deal. Keith Yandle's a 1-year deal. You bring back this guy, Nate Thompson, 1-year deal.
1-year deal. Yep.
Even the trade, now it's a high price. The trade for Rasmus Ristolainen, though, it's 1 year at $5.4 million. Is it a big bet? Yes.
It's 1 year and your first-round draft pick. Is the big part of that.
Well, I was also referring to that more on the contract is a big.
No, I understand. Right.
It's
a lot of money with no salary retained.
Right. Well, when we're talking cap hit percentages, right? Like, that's what I'm saying. Like,
how do you not get Buffalo to retain?
Well,
anyway, different story.
Well, no, they did get Buffalo to retain because that's what Robert Haig was in the deal for. That's what Chuck Fletcher even said.
I guess.
I know that. Well, Robert Haig was your seventh defenseman anyway.
Oh, right, that's fair.
It's not that big of a deal, so let's not even worry about that. So the bottom line though is, and Nate Thompson, by the way, is an 1,000%. It's a fit on this team because of what he can do within reason, meaning
physically,
physically, penalty kill, face-offs, all these little things. He's not going to drive scoring. He's going to play a defensive game.
He's going to be in the bottom six.
And, well, for the most part, that's why here's another guy. If you are playing this guy more than 30 games in your season for any reason other than an injury, you have a problem.
That's fair.
That's the big question mark. The question mark is usage. It's not, the player can't deliver something. Of course he can. And quite frankly, he's the type of guy I don't mind having in the 13th forward role when you're going to play, as Chuck Fletcher noted, there's a stretch in the schedule where they play 5 games in 7 nights. You want to bring him in for the second half of those back-to-backs and sit somebody who's
sure, play him 2 or 3 times that week.
Play him twice that week. Go for it. I'm all for that. But you've got to be mindful of his usage. And again, if someone gets hurt and he's got to step in, he's absolutely a viable guy to step in on the fourth line and play enough minutes and enough games in a row while that guy recovers. Like,
he's serviceable.
Exactly. And he's serviceable. He's a good locker room guy. We know this. They all love him. I mean, how many young guys posted something about Nate Thompson being back because they really liked the guy? Joel Farabee did this. Like, they liked the guy a lot. So Take that for what it's worth. But that's what the question is. It's usage. It's not, oh, the player's awful, he can't bring anything. It's just you got to be smart about how much you use him, how often you use him in a game. Don't, reduce yourself to you're an 11 forward team with Nate Thompson for 6 minutes. You got to be careful about that too. So we will see. I mean, this is very much, and I think it is a legitimate, 1,000% legitimate argument to make, or a legitimate thought to have. If they do not get off to a good start, Alain Vigneault's got to watch out, because his job will be on the line. Because you're literally telling him, here's the toy box. Here is the new items. Look at all these shiny new items. You got a new, a new Ryan Ellis, a new Cam Atkinson, a new Keith Yandle that you did not have a year before, right? And I know Keith Yandle's older. I'm not trying to
and Alain Vigneault's used Keith Yandle before,
right? But you're literally sitting here saying, look what we gave you this year. This is what we did this last offseason. We gave you, not only did we give you new guys to work with, but quite possibly we took away the problem areas. We took away the guys that didn't agree with you, that didn't resonate with you.
We solved the problems theoretically.
Right. That we thought that, like, whatever we thought was wrong with the room and the mix of the team and all that stuff, we've addressed it. We think that this is what will work. And it's on Alain Vigneault now to take that into his hands and go, how can I apply this to make this team as good as possible? And on one hand, maybe it's just as simple as you get to practice. Chuck Fletcher literally said the biggest thing they have coming up, by the way, more important than any game they have coming up, is they've got to have an outstanding camp. That's literally the first thing he said. He goes, what does it all depend on? It doesn't depend on any specific player or any bet or anything. We got to have a good camp. We got to just have a really good camp.
You mentioned Alain Vigneault having to watch out, and I agree with you. If this season goes poorly and Rasmus Ristolainen looks bad and Martin Jones continues to look terrible and some of these bets don't hit, man, if you're management, you have to be real tempted to take Chuck Fletcher with them. Do you not?
Possibly.
And I'm not saying Chuck Fletcher's on the hot seat. I think he's made enough solid moves that ownership feels comfortable with him. But if this blows up and goes nuclear, how many coaches do you give Chuck Fletcher, right? Like, you let him fire Alain Vigneault, hire another coach, and you give him 2 more years? Like, I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I'm saying they think about not doing that.
But it depends, because with what you've done, if you're Chuck Fletcher, you've given this team kind of, quite frankly, at the very least, I'll say this, whether you like Ristolainen, whether you like Yandle, whether you like Thompson, whether you like Martin, it doesn't matter. You can have thoughts on any one of those guys one way or the other. It doesn't matter. You know what you've done at the very least? You've brought some energy back to this team. Not in terms of what we can see on the ice, because we can't prove that yet. There's no way to prove that this team is better energy-wise and performance-wise on the ice until October. There just isn't. But hasn't, like, and you're not on Twitter, I get it, but, like, Twitter's been buzzing because basically there wasn't a day. I turned around and even said, no, and it was funny because you mentioned that we were talking about this last week when we recorded a show, and we had watched let's put it this way, it was from the previous Saturday. Chuck Fletcher had made a trade for Ryan Ellis, then made a trade for Rasmus. I
was going to say, when's the last time a team made 4 big trades in a week?
When's the last time any team made 4 trades in a week?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, anybody.
Do you want to, like, to give you an idea of how this resonated even outside of the world that we know, where people are all in on everything hockey, right?
Right.
On the station on 97.3, you've got people sitting there going, "It's baseball's trade deadline this week. Where's the Phillies management at making moves this week when Chuck Fletcher's out there making 4 trades in a week? Like, look what he's doing.
Right.
How come you're not out there trying to do something?"
That's funny.
And they did later. I'm not saying that, but, like, you had people. I'm saying you had hosts who don't talk about hockey all that much, going, Chuck
Fletcher's active. Why aren't you?
Look at what he's doing, right. But because of the fact that the two teams are so similar in terms of it's stale. It was a stale room, and the last thing you could do was say, we're just going to bring it all back exactly the same way. If you ran it back with the same forward group or the same defensive core or the same 2 goalies, you would have nobody. You've got people's attention again, because at the very least, what are people going to tune in October for? To at least see what these new guys bring.
What the new guys look like, yep.
Right? Because that's at the very least, because you don't have anything to base it off of. You go, you've got 6 new players on a team that's going to ice 20 a game. You know what I mean?
That's a huge percentage in terms
You're
of
over a quarter
roster
of your
turnover.
Team. Over a quarter of your team is brand new,
Yep.
so you might as well see what you have,
Well,
and that's what fans are interested in.
And we talked about it last season. You said, we talked about the changes this team has made, and they changed coaches. They went from Ron Hextall to Chuck Fletcher, and they went from Dave Haxtell to Elaine Vigneault, and you said, hey, if it doesn't work this year, it's on the players. And Chuck Fletcher has come out this summer and proved that it was indeed on the players.
Well, and that's why I think that he's a little safer than Elaine Vigneault is. Because
I think that's fair.
And I only say that because if things start to go bad one way or the other, first of all, I don't think they're going to look at every new guy, or at least two of the new guys. They're not going to look at Cam Atkinson and Ryan Ellis and say, well, gee, it's all...
They're the problem.
They're the problem. And I don't look, to be fair, I think that they're on multi-year deals, and you feel comfortable trading for their multi-year contracts that still have a decent amount left, because I think you feel comfortable with the player.
With where they are as players, right?
Well, because what did we say about Jake Voracek in reality? Okay, so I get it. They make the trade, they trade him off to Columbus to make a trade that gets something new in here, something different, right?
Right.
I get that. But at the end of the day, what we said is that if Jake Voracek came back on the team and was on this team next season, you know what to expect from him. Yep. He's a 10 to 15 goal scorer and 55 to 65, 50 to 60 point guy, because that's what he's been his entire career. And you know what to expect by now. The difference is, does that really get you up and out of bed every day for $8.5 million or $8.25 million?
Well, then that's the thing, is the number.
That was the first thing that I was approached with when I went on the station to talk about that trade, was when goal scoring, you don't pay a guy, or they didn't say this to me specifically, but it was talked about. You don't pay a guy $8 million to not score a ton of goals.
See, you say that, but Phil Deneau just got what, 7 in Los Angeles?
I thought Philip Deneau got 5.5 or 6.
Did he get 5.5? I could have sworn he got 7. I might be wrong about
7 was it had to be somebody else you're thinking.
Maybe that's what he was asking.
Could be, I don't know. I mean, it is what it is, but
maybe you're right, because I really don't know how Phil Deneau didn't get more money than 5.5, if that's what he got.
Okay. Correction then. Let's do this way. If even if Philip Deneau got $7 million, here's the thing about it. Jake Voracek got that $8.25 million how many years ago?
Several years ago.
So what are you saying? Your inflation rate is saying that he's Connor McDavid's contract with 13 goals a year. You know what I mean?
It's not good enough.
That's not the same thing. You don't like that. You know what I mean? What if you have that? That's the thing. What if you have a guy like that? What if Nolan Patrick was that guy? What if Nolan Patrick is 25 goals a year and near 100 points, and you have to sign him?
Phil Deneau is making 5.5. Wow.
Yeah, I was gonna say I knew I saw
crazy.
It was never realistic from what Flyers fans wanted, because Flyers fans wanted him as a third, and I'm not saying that that's wrong to think. But I would take him as a third line center all day, every day.
You can't afford him,
right? I knew that from the beginning, though. If there's still a move to be made, and I do think that there is a possibility, down the line, you have to see what the other two guys this. This is important. You have to see what this turns into, and then you can kind of sit there and go. Yeah. And then you can kind of go, is there enough money out there to sign somebody else to a low-risk, high-reward contract, right?
Right. And for people that aren't watching on YouTube, we're talking about the contracts for Carter Hart and Travis Sanheim, who are currently RFAs. Now, again, the Flyers are sitting on about $8 million in cap space right now, so it's not really a concern if they'll get signed. It's just, at this point, it's kind of a matter of how much and what the numbers look like.
Have you read... Charlie O'Connor broke it down and kind of tried to guess what the cap hit was going to be for both of these guys, or gave his projections.
Okay.
He's not that far off from what I have. I just think they're going on the slightly lower end of that, because they're gonna not. I don't want to call it lowball them. I think they're just going to try to be reasonable with the way last season went and go. Realistically speaking,
here's what you're getting
for the next 2 to 3 years. Here's what we can afford while the cap gets back into shape.
Right. I imagine at least Hart's going to be a bridge deal.
Charlie has it at that it's going to take up almost all of the $8 million that would be left, and I don't think he's off by a lot. I keep coming back to, because I think he had Sanheim at 4.5 or something like that, and had Hart at 3.75.
I feel like you can get Hart under 3.5. I'm pretty sure.
I think Hart's going to be
a poor year.
I think Hart's getting 3.
Yeah, I would love 3x3 for Carter Hart.
I think you're giving Carter Hart $3 million if he agrees to it, and I think you're giving Travis Sanheim, and this is going to sound ridiculously specific, but this is what we do, so I'm going to go with the specific answer. $4.4 million.
Okay.
Because he made 3.25 last year, I believe.
How long is the question on Sanheim specifically?
2 to 3, because
you want to keep his RFA eligibility for one more contract, right? Like, this is a bridge.
You do, but what I keep coming back to with Sanheim, because I don't think Sanheim had the worst year in the world that you're gonna.
He was
rob
fine.
Him, well, right. to the point where you're gonna rob him of an increase. You gave him more time. Like he
deserves a raise. He deserves a little bit of a raise.
But you gave him way more ice time, and quite frankly, you never gave him a truly viable partner, because the guy who you wanted him to play with was awful. And
he made he made the occasional mistake from time to time, for sure, but he was fine most of the time.
Right. So you know what? I think it was down the stretch too. Like the second half of the year, he was a lot better. He got better over the second half of the year.
He got better as the team got worse around him.
Right, kind of. And so here's where I'm at with Sanheim. I think you give Travis Sanheim the Oscar Lindblom style deal where you say, just take the 3 years at this price and we'll talk again later.
I promise we got you.
For right now, this is, I wouldn't be making promises to people.
Wow.
Because in 3 years' time, if you're not very good, you're going to be doing the same thing you did this offseason.
That's fair.
But I would sit there and say, you've got to do the 3-year thing for right now until anything. Carter Hart could honestly be a 2-year at $3 million, because you got to be reasonable. You got to be reasonable with the kid at this point. Like, he was outstanding 1 year and he wasn't the next, and I think you've got to balance that out. He's not making $1 million next year. I can tell you that.
No, I would love it from a capology perspective, but it ain't gonna happen.
Listen, I'd love for you to sit there and say his cap hit's gonna be what Martin Jones is getting. It's not. But
I'd love to see Carter Hart sign for 8 years at $750K a year, but it ain't gonna happen.
Right. And this goes back to my Martin Jones theory, because I think they wanted a 1-year deal. The only goalies who signed a 1-year deal outside of Jones were Braden Holtby, who, guess what?
Also needs to prove himself.
Well, it does, but guess what? Shockingly, it comes out he didn't want to leave the West, so okay.
He wasn't coming here. Right.
It was never even on the table, so that conversation died before it even got to the process of actually trying to negotiate a deal.
Right.
And I would not be shocked if Yaroslav Halak was in the same boat. I want to go out here.
He wants to go where he wants to go.
That news was out way before Tuesday and Wednesday, by the way. So I would say, if I had to guess, that was never on the table, period. So now you are looking at, do you want to potentially say, we're gambling on a guy like Martin Jones, or do you want to gamble on a James Reimer or Laurent Brossoit or any of these guys and say, but it's 2 years now?
Right, and then you're stuck with a bad contract if it's not working out.
How many years? I think at minimum, by the way, I think at least the last 2 seasons. It could be more if I'm not mistaken, but at least the last 2 seasons, Brian Elliott was back on 1-year deals. It was we're just moving it down the line to the next year. You want to stay here? Okay, it's a 1-year deal. Want to stay? 1-year deal. And you could have done the same thing this year, but you wanted to change. I felt like you feel like you had to change the course because you're looking at you. Well, because at the end of the day, you want Carter Hart to come back and play 55 games. You do. Right. It's the truth. It's just you need to have that backup plan for. Something goes wrong. He can't play 55. I need a guy who can step in and play.
Well, and the nice thing is we learned last year, no matter how god-awful a 1-year free agent signing is, you can still flip him at the deadline. Thanks, Eric Gustafson.
Sure, and I think, I don't know if there's going to be a market for Martin Jones at the deadline specifically, but I look at some of the other guys and I go, you know what? If worse comes to worse, you are probably flipping Nate Thompson.
Right, full disaster. You're flipping Nate Thompson.
Right, and guess
what?
If
Yandle wants to go, you're flipping Yandle. I don't know if he has a clause.
He does he has a no move clause.
Okay,
but it's one
Martin Jones. Somebody will take Martin Jones as a 4th goalie for the playoffs if you retain and get him at $1 million.
I don't know about 4th, but
3rd, you know what I mean. There's a world where Martin Jones has a little value as a backup depth goalie.
I get what you mean. I'm not 1,000% sure on that one, but I'll tell you who I could see them actually moving if it came to it. They could find a home for Ristolainen if he's doing okay, but the team's not.
That too.
But listen,
that's another number you can soak up half of that number and get that player much more attractive.
But you can hate what Ristolainen's done in the last few years. You can say the Buffalo effect is not changing. He's just an anchor. I get it if you feel that way. Here's the bottom line, though. What makes this deal better 2 ways over is when you see what happens to Seth Jones after the fact, same day that trade happens, and Seth Jones gets the trade he wants to the team he wants. He goes to Chicago. Okay, that's fine. It was pretty much decided he was only going to play for certain teams. So fine. And then he signs the extension. And the extension is
Hefty.
8 years at $9.5 million. And oh, by the way, the other guy you could have tried to sign, Dougie Hamilton, 7 years at $9 million. Like, these contracts, I don't think are going to age well. That's just me.
I think Hamilton's more likely to age well than the other ones, but yes, I agree with you.
I don't feel good about it, to be honest. I don't. Not on that team without more help. Can I say that at least?
That's fair. Let me put it like this. In 5 years from right now, I'd rather have 2 years left of a $9 million Dougie Hamilton contract than 1 year left of a $6 million Ryan Ellis contract.
We'll see about that down the line. 5 years is a long time to go down the line.
That's fair.
What I don't like about it is that, like, to me, does New Jersey get better with Dougie Hamilton? Of course they do. That's obvious. But I'm almost curious this year. What are you going to do this year?
I think they're banking on Mackenzie Blackwood. Like, I don't know if they expect to be good, but I think they expect to look kind of like the Ottawa Senators, where they're coming.
It's not even that I'm like saying it from that angle though. What I'm trying to get is that, okay, yeah, you might be banking on your goalie a lot, but if you're in the situation that like Dougie Hamilton is, are you going to run this guy into the ground and play him near 30 minutes a night because he's the number? Yeah, okay, but this is why I'm concerned about the contract then, because if you run him into the ground in year 1, what's year 3 or 4 going to look like? Like,
I think that's a valid concern.
Like, I'm not like, that's why I sit there and I look at this top pairing and I go, you're going to have some really good balance on the Flyers for $13 million, where other guys are making $9.5 million, $10 million, $11 million a year. And that's one guy. And we already think some of them are washed up.
Right.
Like what happens now when you have, by the way, one of those guys, like, the Werenski deal came out, and right away I shot the text over and I go, this guy keeps looking better and better every day, doesn't he? You know?
Yep. And you're not wrong about that.
Ivan Provorov's 6-year contract entering year number 3, so he's got 4 years left at $6.75 million. While Zach Werenski's making $9.5 million, just over $9.5 million
for those next. Yeah.
And guess whose deal is going to be up relatively soon? Charlie McAvoy's going to need a contract. Guess how much money he's going to get? He's going to get $9 million.
He'll sign for 5.5 because it's Boston.
No, he won't though, because that they will compare, and he will be one of the because he already plays the minutes. He's already assumed the role. He will play.
I have a feeling his contract is going to come in at least $1.5 million under market value.
Maybe it does. If it does,
because that's how Boston works. Look at Pasta. David Pasternak's making less than 6.7.
No, I know he is, but that's not how Boston works. That's a Tampa tactic now.
Sure,
too.
It is. It turns out teams want to play there. It's amazing how that works, isn't it?
What you mean? It's amazing how it works that if you have a good team, then players don't necessarily worry about how much money they're making because you actually have a shot to win.
It's amazing. Players want to win. Oh, all right.
This is why I'm saying Dougie Hamilton at $9 million, because you don't walk in.
I get it.
No, you walk in going, well, New Jersey can afford it. They want more help. Here I am. Come pay me the money. Here we go. It's like Jerry Maguire. Show me the money, right? Like, just show me the money. You know.
You know what? You're not wrong.
That's how some of these guys walk around, because it's. Oh, you want help? You want help immediately? Like, and guess what? It's not always guys who go to play for a really good team, because guess what? That's Alex Pietrangelo. Alex Pietrangelo is going, it's not you want to be good. Alex Pietrangelo goes to Vegas, and it's
you want to win?
You want next level?
Yep.
I'll give you next level.
You want elite?
Where's the money? Exactly. So that's how it plays out. Are they better? It remains to be seen. I think
it does.
If you're asking me today, and I don't, look, I'm not like the players aren't going to change, but maybe my perception changes based on what you're paying Carter Hart and Travis Sanheim, and if you have room to add. I don't know if you're going to have room to add. Maybe you will. Like, I don't think you're
going to have much.
I don't. I'd love to see them at the end of the whole thing somehow have, let's just say, have $1 million.
I'd love to see 1.5. That's kind of the number I was looking at.
1.5 would be glorious. You know why? Because I would love to see if 1.5. Depending on who hangs around long enough, and maybe this is a little ridiculous because of the fact that you joked about it being the Boston gang, right? Maybe they're just going to keep reuniting AV with old players, because I would love to get Derek Stepan or Derek Brassard on like that low risk, high reward contract.
Derek Stepan would be a beautiful third line center on this team. or even fourth
Potentially.
line center.
Right. And I mean, look, because let's just say there's a lot of people out there, and you're not going to get this guy for less than $2 or $3 million easy. But like a lot of people want it as soon as like the Islanders are struggling to sign people right now because they're trying to weigh who they're giving the money to.
Because they're going to sign Zach Parise and Ryan Suter.
No, Ryan Suter went to Dallas.
Oh, right. I forgot. I missed that news.
No, but Parise's not officially announced yet. You're right about that.
Yeah.
So it's like they're sitting there. They're going to do it, but like it's what is it going to cost? And like nobody knows terms. That's what we're sitting there going. Right. What is it? But there's people out there that
it's Lou Lamoriello, so we're not going to know the terms until it's on Cap Friendly.
Right. But there's a lot of people who go like they're weighing these decisions, and Casey Zizekas is a free agent. Jump at it, like right, like because people love watching what he's done for them. It doesn't mean it's going to, by the way, it does not mean it's going to equate exactly that way with another team.
Of course, because you're not playing under Barry Trotz.
Well, it works well, right? You're not playing under Barry Trotz, and it works really well for the New York Islanders. And what works well for the New York Islanders doesn't necessarily work for somebody else.
Every receiver who left the Patriots under Belichick went on to be all-stars everywhere else, right?
I don't know about that.
That's I know.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say nobody did, right?
Right. All right. So
one, and he's not a receiver, but Gronk's had a good kind of broke out. Well, yeah, it's
okay, but he still played with Tom Brady.
That's true. He needed to go where Tom Brady did to make it work. I gotcha.
All right.
So we'll see what happens. I mean, we're gonna take like we said, we're gonna take a week off now.
Yep, we're gonna go back to our every other week for the summer here.
Well, because this was exactly what Chuck Fletcher said. He literally basically said, if you don't have it figured out by like 2 days after the free agency period opens, you're kind of in trouble. And I do want to add really quick about where he's at. Credit to Chuck Fletcher for, at the very least, if you would have told me this team's going to come into the offseason and on paper, let's just say we're doing the on paper thing. I get it. They're going to need a top pairing defenseman, a backup goalie. Somewhere down the line, you're going to need another defenseman. You could use a third line center. You would love to add somebody who can play higher than that on like the wing, who has some scoring touch. But how many things is that I just mentioned? That's like 5 things. And with the cap landscape the way it is, how are you supposed to do that?
It's tough to address all that.
Right. How do you address all of it? And he goes out and in getting
Kinda
ahead
does
of
all of it.
right, and in getting ahead of the market, got 2 new defensemen for the top 4, added a depth signing on defense that is low risk, high reward. You're gonna love having from a personality standpoint.
From a social media perspective, you're gonna love having Keith Yandle just for the mic'd up.
Right. Well, someone even said if you're doing your job wrong if you don't mic up both Kevin Hayes and Keith
every
Yandle
game.
Yep.
Every night. Right. Those 2 and Scott and Travis Konechny. Done.
Yeah.
Scott Lawton if you got a 4th mic laying around.
So you bring in 3 new defensemen to cover basically the biggest weakness of the team last season. You do go out and still get the backup goaltender at question marks? Sure. One of the defensemen has question marks too. Doesn't matter. You still addressed the areas and made it fit under the cap somehow.
You got a different answer in town. It might not be the right answer, but it's a different answer, and we'll see.
But the ones that you're saying it might not be the right answer to, again, are 1-year contracts. The ones that you think are really the right, like
absolutely.
I think Ryan Ellis is a perfect fit on this team, and that's why I don't I sit there and go, the 6-year contract's great. You solidified that pair. That pair's not going anywhere.
If the Flyers come up with a decent alternate jersey this year, I might buy a Ryan Ellis.
I think they're just sticking with what they have, aren't they?
They always come up with a. I don't know. I haven't really heard anything about jerseys for next year.
I don't think they want to change anything personally. Like if they're, I think the only thing that's changing is I think the reverse retros are disappearing.
Thank God.
Yeah, I hear you.
So bad. Bad.
Where was I going with this? Okay, and then the forward is Cam Atkinson comes in, can play penalty kill really well. By the way, one of the things I don't know if we mentioned on here last week when we talked about him is second in the league in the last 5 years, I think it is, or 4 years, in shorthanded goals behind Brad Marchand only. Pretty
don't
good
hate
company.
saying that.
Pretty good company, right? So, but 2 years removed from a 41 goal season, probably good for at least 20 to 25.
Especially when you have shorthanded goal specialist Kevin Hayes on your team.
Shorthanded goal specialist. Forget that part. Especially when you have.
It's the only time you can score.
Especially when you have former college teammate that you could literally say, "Hey, the 2 college guys,
you
BC
two
guys,
go."
Get on, right, BC guys, get on the ice.
Yep.
I mean,
Kevin Hayes wins the face-off. Cam Atkinson goes end to end and scores. Done.
Well, we can talk about this on a future episode because it's going to be something that's worth talking about when we really want to try to, especially with the paper game. But they are going to have really good special team balance when you think about who can play one and who can play the other, or who plays both. Doesn't really matter. But they're going to have good balance. It's going to be really
Sean Couturier probably went, thank you. Because he doesn't have to play all 2 minutes of every power play and all 2 minutes of every penalty kill.
You mean with the two forwards that they added because Cam Atkinson and Nate Thompson can do it, and he just sits there and goes, "Yes, thank you. I can play. Thank you for the 5-on-5. Like I can play better at 5-on-5 now. I'll be more effective." Yeah,
also, one thing I'm very excited, and we are wrapping the show here. One thing I'm very excited about is I want Cam Atkinson to take Travis Konechny under his wing and teach him how to play kind of that speedy style role at the NHL level.
Okay, you mean so you want him to teach him how to play the skilled grinder role, the guy?
Yeah, exactly.
The gigantic, as if they're both really tall. They're not.
Neither of them are gigantic.
I would say we had this conversation last week. These are the two guys on the team that make me feel better about my own height, literally. And
well, right. And I want Cam Atkinson to kind of take Travis Konechny under his wing and teach him how to play at that size.
Cam Atkinson right now is. I'm trying to okay. I know you're not the biggest baseball guy, so I'm not going to make the baseball reference here because there's a guy, because it's a little bit more obscure. But you know who he's kind of like right now in terms of his energy level online, because he's posting a lot of stuff.
He is fired up online. Yeah.
He's like, it's J.J. Watt like, because J.J. Watt goes out and gives you like a thing and you go, this is why we love this guy, because he's energetic about the team. He's so passionate about the team he plays for and wants to do it. Like Cam Atkinson is all in on this right now. Cam Atkinson has changed his social media around. And by the way, did you see Kevin Hayes on Instagram at all, on his Instagram stories?
No.
Okay, he made a post, or he had a post. If there's no way in hell he did this himself, because he has to know somebody who can help him with this, because it was a Photoshop picture of him in a game and Cam Atkinson now in the 89 Flyers jersey, ready to go. Right, and like as if it was in a game, and put something up about like some hype message. Right,
that's
like,
funny.
Whatever. That's in his story after Cam gets traded. Then Keith Yandle signs, and he puts up a video, and now it's the same thing. Here's another Photoshop picture. Now Keith Yandle's in a Flyers jersey, and by the way, he's got the right to keep the number he had in Florida. It is available, so if he wants it, go ahead and have it. Number 3 is available. It's not retired or anything. Go ahead and have at it. Yeah, right. I mean, ironically, not the last guy to wear it, because if you can believe it, do you know who the last Flyer to wear that number is?
No.
Mark Friedman.
Bye.
I knew you were going to say that.
All right.
But regardless, so he posts another thing, and it's funnier than the first one because let's be real, it's Keith Yandle. I mean, the clip that the Flyers posted, I was ready to post the day that the whole thing came out, because if nothing else. And look, whether you like them, hate them, whatever, I went and immediately, after this news comes out and the signing was official, first there was an NHL press conference style thing, if you will, where they just did a Q&A, and it was all Boston guys. So it was Kevin Hayes is on there, Chris Kreider was on there, and Chris Wagner was on there. And they started off with like the guy who moderates these things, like typically. And then they go, well, wait, we got somebody else on the call. And it was Keith Yandle. And
of course it was.
And Hayes is rolling. Hayes is ready, and Yandle pops on the screen, and Kevin Hayes just yells, "My guy!" Like, this is the atmosphere you're getting in this Flyers locker room next year, so get ready for it. But they also, Chicklets did a sandbagger with the two of them playing golf together. They were the pairing against Biz and Witt,
right.
And the stuff that they are saying to each other, like,
it's crazy.
I watched it, because I even told you I don't listen to Chicklets often. Usually what makes me listen is if they get a good interview, because the interviews can be real good insightful stuff for a lot of stuff. I went back and watched that for nothing more than just to sample the banter, because I remember when it came out and it's like, well, it involves Kevin Hayes, let me watch it because Kevin Hayes is funny. We know this now. So I watched it for that alone, just to go, well, let me watch the banter between these two, because this is what's to come now. This is the room that you're going to get. And I'm excited for that, because it's definitely,
well,
like, if that's the type of room you're going to get. I remember watching guys 2 years ago have an awful lot of fun with each other. That's what you're gonna get now.
Yeah,
you're gonna get a fun room, and it's gonna be good. And everybody seems like, even if they're not the fun, like known to be the fun, like Yandle gets signed, and Kevin Hayes is a fun guy, and Yandle's a fun guy, and Atkinson's a ball of energy, so he seems like a fun guy. Ryan Ellis didn't come across that way, but who knows what happens when you get around? Like he's doing a media call. How am I supposed to tell that from a media call?
Right.
I bet he's a great time when he's out with the boys or whatever. I bet Risto's a ball too, because Risto kind of had, like, he came out and basically flat out said, I just want to be a pain in the ass,
Right. Well, I did hear about that.
Like, it's that, like, okay, then bring that personality here and see if it changes some things. Let's see what happens. Martin Jones seemed like excited for a new beginning.
Yeah, it sounds like everybody's excited. Kevin Hayes is excited. You're excited. I'm excited. And
we'll talk in the future about, like, all that other stuff. I mean,
absolutely.
I don't want to go out on a limb. I assume that the next time we have a show in 2 weeks, I think there might be somebody. I think from that group of two will have a contract.
I think that's probably fair.
I think that we will have a contract to talk about, and then the rest of it will be, we'll continue to ask the question based on these contracts: can they do anything else beyond this? And we'll continue to look at the roster on paper and say what's better, what's worse, all that, blah blah blah.
Absolutely, and make sure
that's August for you. And
make sure to tune in 2 weeks for that show. You'll be able to find it anywhere you can find your podcast, just like you found this one: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, Podbean, SportsTalkPhilly.com. You know where to find us by now. Make sure to follow us over on YouTube if you're not already. At YWT Podcast on Twitter. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso. And I think that's just about it for this week. In 2 weeks, maybe we'll finally talk about the draft picks at length.
There's not much to talk about with that.
No, there's not.
Really. Like, I left it up there just in case, because we only had 3 signings to get to, but we really broke. You know what we did with these 3 signings that we didn't do with some of the other ones, and we did kind of with the other ones now too by doing this.
Yeah.
We looked at everybody else. We said, how does this fit with everybody else? What does Keith Yandle do for Cam York? What does Keith Yandle do for the bottom of the defensive groups? Martin Jones, how many games should he play? The bet is on Carter Hart. What do you do with Nate? All this, you know what I mean? Like Nate Thompson.
Absolutely.
Like we really looked at where it's going, and that's why I said I think the next conversation we have, if there's not a lot of news, is what it does to the special teams group, because I think the special teams is going to be very different. And it's going to be cool to see. So,
all right, so come back in 2 weeks and watch us put all the rest of the pieces together and get our first real good look at the 2021-2022 Philadelphia Flyers.
Know what else we might talk about a little? Know what else we might talk about a little bit too? The schedule, because we didn't really talk about the schedule.
Ooh, you're right. That's definitely a good one for next time.
If we're excited about these guys, we should really start getting excited about the schedule.
Absolutely. So until then, 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be there. See ya.